Today's the day of the show, and I'm walking to work. This is my commute. How somebody gets to work is called a commute. Follow along on mine.
This is my commute.
This is my commute.
Man. Hey, Tim. Hey, are you heading towards the museum?
Air and space?
Yeah.
Yeah, hop on in.
Great.
Seatbelt. Whoa! This is my commute.
Hey, Piers. You would not believe my commute this morning.
Whoa! Come on!
You call that a commute? You should have seen my ride.
Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 0 and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, reaching the crest of its historic achievements in space.
Wow, that was some commute, but I'll bet it was a lot longer than mine.
Yeah, well, the mileage was further, but it only took 8 minutes. That's going fast.
Wow, I'm just glad I made it here in time for the show.
Ooh, when does the show start?
It's right now. This is STEM in 30. Hi, I'm Marty Kelsey.
And I'm Beth Wilson, and we are coming to you live from the National Air and Space Museum.
Today we are in the Moving Beyond Earth Gallery, and this gallery is amazing. There are all kinds of artifacts that have flown in space in this gallery, and one of my favorites is this Space Shuttle main engine. There are 3 of these on the orbiter, and each of them produces over 400,000 pounds of thrust. You couple that with the 2 external boosters, and it gets you into space really fast. Also in this gallery, there's a little green space ranger that's been in space that you might recognize. I think you know him as Buzz Lightyear.
And you guys, our friends from Luther Jackson Middle School, will have some time to look for Buzz Lightyear after the show.
We'd like to welcome our online viewers today. Thank you guys for watching, and all of the viewers on NASA TV. And also remember that you can participate today online. Go to our website and you can submit questions. We have an expert standing by downstairs ready to answer those questions, and some of them we'll actually use on the show today.
In today's episode, we're going to be looking at living and working in space. And to get us started, let's take a look at the outpost we have up there right now, the International Space Station.
I am standing in front of the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. We collect artifacts on space and aviation history, but there's one artifact that we can't collect. That's the International Space Station. Right now it's orbiting 250 miles above the Earth. To get an idea of how big it is, let's bring it a little bit closer. Traveling at over 17,500 miles per hour, the station completes one orbit every 90 minutes. It is powered by a solar array that covers more than an acre. It has taken over 180 spacewalks to construct the station, which weighs more than 1 million pounds. There are 52 computers on board, as well as over 8 miles of wires connecting electrical power systems. The livable area of the space station is about the same as a 6-room house. It has 2 bathrooms, a gym, and a 360-degree window.
The space station has been continuously occupied for almost 15 years. It has been home to astronauts from 15 different countries. Currently, there is a crew of 6 on board, including Mikhail Koryenko and Scott Kelly, who are spending an entire year in space. Together they are part of 10 separate investigations to study the subtle and not so subtle effects of spaceflight on the human body. The space station is truly an international endeavor with 68 countries all running different experiments, everything from human biology to biochemistry to physical sciences. Who knows what sorts of wonderful discoveries will come from these?
I'd like to introduce our guest today, Dr. Valerie Neal. She is the chair of the Space History Department here at the National Air and Space Museum. Thank you so much for joining us today. So our theme today is living and working in space. Right. Tell us a little bit about the day-to-day activities of actually living in space.
The day-to-day activities in space are a lot like those here on Earth. The astronauts wake up, they clean up, they have breakfast, they go to work, take a lunch break, work some more, come back for dinner, maybe do a little exercise, maybe have a little recreation or entertainment and relaxation in the evening and go to sleep. So what they do is not all that different than what we do here on a typical day, but where they do it and how they do it is what is different.
It seems like things that we take for granted here that are really simple here on Earth become much more complex when you get into space.
That's true. They become different. Not necessarily more complex, but different, because when you're in space, of course, you're weightless, and everything around you is weightless. Things float unless they are held in place, and that changes everything. You have to think more about the things you're doing. And you also have to make some accommodations to weightlessness. And a good example is for women astronauts, particularly those who have long hair, they have to give some thought to how they wear their hair in space. If I were there right now, this hair would be floating out all around my head in a halo. But if I had long hair, it would be really floating around. It might get in my eyes, it might tickle your nose, it might get tangled up in some of the equipment. So NASA made a rule that people with long hair in space need to keep their hair confined in a ponytail, with a scrunchie, a headband, a barrette. That has affected really only the women astronauts so far, because most of the men go up with short hair. But we actually have a scrunchie on display in this gallery that was worn by one of the female astronauts in space. That's one example of things you have to do a little differently.
Now, eating is something that all the astronauts have to do in space, but even that's become different being in orbit.
That's different as well, and the reason is there's no refrigerator nor a freezer on board. So all the food has to be prepared in advance and packaged in a way that it won't spoil. So the food they use is a lot like the food that soldiers use when they're on active duty, or that you might use when you go camping. And it's all prepared, it's just ready to be warmed up. If it's in a packet like this, or if it's in a packet like this, it just needs to have some water added. Squinch it all around to make sure that it dissolves, and suddenly you have a fruit drink, or you have macaroni and cheese or oatmeal, whatever, by adding water. And you don't really need a whole set of silverware. You need a spoon and a pair of scissors, because after you have prepared your food, you need to snip into it, open it up so you can get a spoon in there and eat it so it won't go floating away. They don't use dishes, they don't use cups, glasses, nothing that has to be cleaned up afterwards. You eat right out of the packages and then throw it all in the trash.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that astronauts really enjoy to do, they all kind of have the same thing they like to do in their free time when they're in space.
Yes, it's surprising. Their favorite leisure activity is just simply to look out the window, because think of the view, our incredible Earth below them. They're flying over it at 17,500 miles an hour. In an hour and a half, they can go entirely around the world, see all the continents, see day and night, lightning, places where people live, and places that are so remote they're hard to get to. So they love watching the Earth.
That's amazing. So we've got some questions that we're going to ask, and we're going to start with a video question from Benjamin Banneker Elementary School in Kansas City, Kansas.
Hi, my name is Weber, and my question is, how do you exercise out of space?
How do you exercise in space?
Very good question. You have a gym right inside the International Space Station. There are 3 pieces of equipment. One is a treadmill, one is a stationary bicycle, and one is a weightlifting machine. Basically, the bicycle, of course, has no wheels. It's just one you sit on and pedal. to your heart's content. But you have to use bungee cords and seat belts and straps of various kinds to stay on the equipment to get your resistance exercise, because otherwise you just float off of it.
All right, we've got an online question next. Do astronauts know if it's day or night?
Astronauts do know if it's day or night simply by looking out the window, but what's day or night on the Earth may not be day or night for them. They're operating on their own 24-hour cycle, and it's kind of independent of whether it's light or dark outside. It's based on the clock.
Okay. We've got an audience question next.
Have there ever been any problems with spacesuits?
Have there been any problems with spacesuits?
Occasionally there are problems with spacesuits not fitting quite properly, or the equipment that runs the spacesuit to circulate the air, circulate the water may develop a problem, but the astronauts have spacesuit repair kits on board, and if they're having a problem, they can fix it, or there's always a spare spacesuit, so they can just use a different one if their own isn't working properly.
Awesome. Well, Beth had an opportunity a few days ago to talk with Paolo Nespoli, who is a two-time spaceflight veteran. He flew once on the space shuttle and once on a Soyuz spacecraft. So she had an opportunity to talk to him about his 6 months that he spent in space. Let's head over to Beth with Paolo Nespoli.
Hi, I'm Beth Wilson, and I'm here with Paolo Nespoli, who is an Italian astronaut with the European Space Agency. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today at STEM in 30.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure.
No problem. We've got some questions for you. I know that you spent a lot of time on the International Space Station. What was your most challenging work you had to do on the International Space Station?
Well, I think one of the first challenges that you get when you go in space and you stay for a long duration is that you essentially have to become an extraterrestrial person. So when the people ask me, do you believe in extraterrestrials? Yes, I was one of them. So you have to learn to live in an environment where there is no gravity, meaning that the actual things that we do all the time do not work up there. And at the beginning, you really try hard to behave the same way you behave here on Earth, and it doesn't work. You cannot do things are not efficient, it's very crazy, and things like that. And then, after a while, when you understand this is a new situation, you need to explore, you need to try things, you need to become Superman, fly from one place to the other, and do exceptional things that you cannot do here. Then, that's when you actually really start working, and it's a very good challenge.
Now, you flew both on the shuttle and on the Soyuz.
Yes.
Can you explain the difference between the two spacecraft?
The launch itself between the two vehicles is pretty much the same, more or less. The shuttle is a little bit rougher at the beginning, but then it smooths out, and the Soyuz starts very smooth, and then it gets rough at the end. But the re-entry is completely different. The shuttle re-enters almost like a spacecraft, almost, more or less. The Soyuz instead re-enters with a parachute, and the way it breaks in the atmosphere and everything that happens inside in this half an hour horror, it's pretty much fairly rough, I would say. And you are inside there. You trained from a technical point of view many times on Earth, but when things happen in there, you are constantly surprised, and you actually kind of, whoa, what was that? Am I alive? Are we alive? And it keeps going like this. I usually summarize it, say that it's a sequence of catastrophic events that happen in rapid succession until you eventually go to the last part, which is the soft landing, which is equivalent to a car crash between a truck and a car. And you are in a car, not in the truck. And then you are on Earth, like, whoa, that was pretty good entry.
What was your favorite job when you were on the International Space Station? What was your favorite thing to do?
Well, we work pretty hard when we are up there because, we are one of the resources of the space station, and on the ground, the planning team tries to make the most out of this laboratory and the resources. So you're pretty busy, let's say, from 7:30 in the morning until 8:30 in the evening running experiments. You can be either a guinea pig or the hands of the scientist, or you can be going around fixing fixing broken stuff, unloading a cargo, moving the robotic arm, or even go out on a spacewalk if you are lucky. So all of us, and I did the same, like to go to the cupola and look at the Earth when it passes by at 8 kilometers per second, 5 miles a second. You can actually see in an hour and a half the whole world passing under your feet, and that's an amazing view.
Well, thank you so much for answering our questions today.
You're welcome.
Well, Paulo talked a little bit about the jobs that they do in space. Can you tell us a little bit more about the day-to-day jobs that they actually do there?
Sure. There's 6 people on the International Space Station, and they're all scientists or engineers. And they are doing the work of scientists all around the world. There are a couple of hundred experiments on board. So most of the crew, most of the time, is doing science in one of 3 laboratories. Some of the experiments are life sciences experiments where they're studying how the human body changes in the space environment. Some of them are looking at how plants grow or how small animals develop in microgravity. Someday we may need to have a garden in space or on Mars or on the moon, so they want to learn those things. In addition, they look at forming materials in space, forming metals and such, to see how different it is when gravity is not the dominant force. And they even set small fires in a controlled container to see how fire behaves in weightlessness and how smoke does, because if a fire ever broke out on the space station, they need to know that for safety.
Now, there's also a life science experiment going on right now with Scott and Mark Kelly, who are twin brothers. And Scott is up on the space station, and Mark is staying here on Earth.
That's right, and that's never been accomplished before. It's a very unique research experiment to see what differences develop over these 2 people in the course of a year. We haven't had in the United States anybody stay in space that long before. And when you're in space, your body is sort of at rest. Except for the exercise that you do on a treadmill or bicycle, your body's resting, your muscles are beginning to deteriorate, your stamina is getting less. And so they want to see how much Scott changes compared to Mark in the course of this year.
Now, they don't only work inside the space station, but they also do work outside the space station.
Right, and that's the work everybody wants to do, to get to go out on a spacewalk. Extravehicular activity means putting on the white spacesuit, heading outside, usually to do some kind of assembly task or a repair task. Right now, with the space station complete, assembly is pretty much over, but there are batteries that need to be changed, or there may be something that stops working. So they will gather up their tools, go outside, spend the full 8-hour workday outside doing whatever needs to be done. And when they come in, they are hungry because all they've had during that 8 hours is water.
Wow. Now you
inside their suit.
Oh, wow. Now you mentioned tools. And that's one of the really important things that they have outside the spacecraft are different tools. So we're going to go over to STEM It to Win It to learn more about the tools they use on spacewalks.
And welcome to STEM It to Win It. As Marty said, when you're in space working, you need specific tools. So what my friends here are going to do is I'm going to show them each a tool, and they're going to guess what it is. Are you all ready to go? Yes. Okay. First tool, what is this?
Is it so that you don't, you stay on?
Okay, so this would be something that would strap you on to the spacecraft is what you're thinking. Okay, well, we also put this online and we have an online poll. So let's see what our online viewers said. 100% said it was a tether. Now to answer what this actually is, we have Dr. Jennifer Levasseur.
So this is an astronaut waist tether used during extravehicular activities or spacewalking. So what an astronaut would do is clip one end of it to the waist. There's a small clip on the waist of the spacesuit, and then they would clip the other end to the space station. And so it's a safety tether because it's a 2-part mechanism. You have to press the buttons and then unlatch it. So that pretty much guarantees they're not going to become detached from the space station.
Okay, are we ready for the next one? What are these? Quickly, come with a guess. Come on, someone knows. All right, what are they? What's your best guess?
Are they for like grabbing things?
Are they for grabbing things? Actually, I thought they were bubble wands. Let's see what our online poll had to say. 86% said they were wire ties. Let's see what Dr. Levasseur has to say. So astronauts need to use things just like we do on Earth. These are called wire ties, which may seem a little bit more complicated than they actually are. Just imagine trying to use a twist tie in your own home to close a garbage bag. So if astronauts need to temporarily tie something together, they can take one of these wire ties and wind it around something, and it has nice big holes on the end for them to put their gloved hands through. We've had great guesses so far. We've got one last tool. What do you all think this is? All right.
Something like you put things in it and
something that you might put things in. All right, let's see what our online audience thought it was. A toolbox. All right, that was the 57% thought it was a toolbox. Let's see what it is. So when astronauts are doing EVAs, they need a safe place to put even just little things that they've used up. And so this is actually a trash bag. And you can see on top, it has some elasticized closures on top so that when they put something inside, it doesn't float back out. Well, my friends did a great job here at STEM It to Win It. Now, for you all at home and here in the audience, if you ever want to see the International Space Station, we're going to show you how to spot it from your own backyard.
We can spot the International Space Station from our backyard, and all that we need to know is when and where to look. Let's start by going to the NASA website, spotthestation.nasa.gov. This will give us all the information we need. Now, let's try to spot the station. We see on this pass the station will become visible at northwest at 8:32 p.m. Let's be sure we are on time because the space station won't wait. First, let's use our compass to find west. Now find north. Northwest is between north and west. North-northwest is between northwest and north. Okay, got it. Next, we see it's going to disappear in the east. Got that location. The entire visible pass will happen between those two areas. Now we have to determine how high it's going to be. Height is measured in degrees. There's a simple way to determine this height. Hold your hand out away from your body and make a fist. If you place the bottom of your fist on the horizon, that line where the sky meets the ground, the top of your fist will be approximately 10 degrees. You can then stack your fists on top of each other to reach 20, 30, 40 degrees or higher. Tonight, the space station will appear at 10 degrees north-northwest. If I place one fist in front of me while looking north-northwest, this is where it should first become visible. Got it. It will disappear at 20 degrees east. Right there. At its highest point, it will reach 40 degrees. Bingo. We now have a good idea of the approximate path that the space station will be traveling along. It's almost time. Let's look in the general direction of where the pass will become visible. We will scan a wider area in case we are a little off with our measurements. The station does not have lights outside that are visible from Earth. When we see it, we are actually seeing the sun reflecting off of it. Once the station becomes visible, it will take about 6 minutes to pass across the sky. It will not blink like an airplane. It will look like a very bright star that is traveling very fast across the sky. Here it comes. Wave to the astronauts.
We have a little bit of time for more questions, and we're going to start with another video question from Banneker Elementary School in Kansas City, Kansas.
Hi, my name is Lenai, and my question is, while you're working, what happens when something breaks?
What happens when something breaks?
Well, the astronauts take a lot of tools with them up to the International Space Station. There's some lockers filled with tools like you'd find in your garage or your basement, and they are well trained for all the equipment that's on board, and most of them were tinkerers in their youth. They like to take things apart and put them back together, and so they can handle the repairs themselves very well.
All right, we've got an online question next. What happens if an astronaut becomes sick or injured in space? Are there doctors?
One of the doctors is always designated to be the flight medical officer on board, and they have a basic first aid kit. They can take care of minor injuries there. If somebody should become injured, which is very, very unlikely because there are no sharp edges there, and they're weightless, so they're not going to trip and stumble on things. But if somebody should develop a problem that couldn't be dealt with on board, they can get back to Earth pretty quickly from low Earth orbit. They can be back down on the ground in about 3 hours' time. So fortunately, that has never happened yet. They've never had to evacuate somebody to a hospital on the ground.
All right, we've got an audience question next.
How does it feel emotionally and physically when you return to Earth?
That's a really good question because, as you might suspect, there are a whole range of sensations and emotions. Obviously, they're glad to be back with their families and with their friends. They're glad to be home again. They're glad to eat a really good hamburger because they haven't had fresh food or cooked food in a long time. But they also, a lot of them say they feel a nostalgia for the space station because it's just such an entrancing place to be. And for the first couple of days, they still feel kind of weightlessness. Especially if they wake up in the night, they kind of feel like they could float out of bed and get a drink of water, and then they fall flat on the floor. So it takes a few days for that feeling of being on Earth to come back. They also say that as soon as they're back in Earth's gravity, they feel very heavy. They're really aware of the weight of the air pressure on them, and after being light for weeks or months at a time, that's a real sensation of being able to feel gravity.
Yeah, I've heard that the sheets even feel like they're super heavy when they get back to Earth. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time for today. I'd like to thank you for joining us, as well as the astronauts you saw on the show, Piers Sellers and Paolo Nespoli. We'd like to thank them, as well as Curator Jennifer Levasseur, for answering some questions about tools. A big thanks to you guys here in the audience. You all had some great questions today, as well as Benjamin Banneker Elementary School. Thank you guys for submitting great video questions. Don't forget, you can check out our archive on the STEM in 30 website, where you can see shows on space junk, composites, and hot air balloons, among others. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to our crew. We have an amazing crew. It takes about 11 or 12 people to bring this show to you every time when we come out. So thank you to those guys. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching.